Hi, everybody. I'm Jordan Ostroff with Legalese Marketing, and this is Exhibit A Attorneys, where we interview attorneys and other experts across the country to talk about what it takes to truly be the Exhibit A of a successful attorney. Joining me today, one of my all-time favorite people, Melissa Shanahan of Velocity Work, who is going to share with us how to unlock your most important asset. So for those of you, anybody who doesn't already know Melissa and Velocity Work, so Melissa is a fan of hip hop and jazz, both separately and together. That is her go-to fact that people pull for her bio, as per our last conversation. But ultimately, Velocity Work was founded after Melissa worked for years in consulting firms focused on the growth of private practices across the United States, coached over 350 doctors, dentists, and lawyers, and then really, for some reason, made the maybe good, maybe stupid decision to focus only on attorneys. Just it depends upon us and depends upon the day how we treat Melissa. So just loves the fact that attorneys who go out on their own are her favorite people. They work so hard to become a lawyer, and they have the guts to start their own firm, even though they don't receive training on how to build a business. That takes guts. Yes, very true. And in fact, I think so much of what we learn in law school teaches you the opposite of opening up your own firm. I think so much of it teaches you how to be a good cog in the wheel of some large law office or law firm. And so now we need to take those guts. So Velocity Work is committed to serving these extraordinary humans, build a firm that they're proud of and a life that they love. Melissa hosts the Velocity Work podcast and is an extremely effective coach for attorneys running their own firms. Melissa brings her A game to everything she does. Very true. Her energy is infectious. It absolutely is. And the material she's teaching will forever change how people think. From mindset to vision to productivity to tracking firm data, Velocity Work has helped hundreds of attorneys grow their firm on their terms, which is so true. And I think that if anybody has not listened to Melissa's podcast, there are not that many that are interviews, but the interviews I think are the easiest way to see your energy of what it's like working with a client, because of that level of interest and excitement that you bring to the question and the questioning phase on your podcast, I think is exactly what your clients experience with you as their coach.
Oh, cool.
So thank you. Thank you for being here.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me. This is like highlight of my week, man.
And it's only 1:30 on a Monday in Eastern time, and it's even less for you. So we've started the week off on a positive note. We've also got comments to our last show. For those of you after you're done watching this one, if you want to hear more shows, we had Josh Barron on, who talked about the hidden secrets to generating high quality referrals. A very awesome episode on a topic near and dear to my heart, because without referrals, I definitely wouldn't be here. But then without Melissa, I wouldn't have moved from where I was to where I am now. So what got you here won't get you there. And now we're talking about those next steps. We have your LinkedIn, Velocity Works LinkedIn. We have the Velocity Work Instagram. And then I don't know what other contact information is coming. We have Melissa at velocitywork.com.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, Clubhouse is new. Follow me on Clubhouse.
There we go. What are you on Clubhouse?
I'm having a blast on there. What'd you say?
What's your Clubhouse tag?
Velocity. Good question. This is lack of preparation right here. Velocity Work, all one word.
Oh, Velocity Work. That's what I would have guessed.
Yeah, but my name, it'll say my name when you type that in. Yeah, it's at
Velocity Work
Melissa
on
Shanahan.
Clubhouse. And for everybody listening or watching this, we are going to be doing a Clubhouse next Monday at 2:30, right after the show. So Iffy and I will be talking about ways to use Instagram and Clubhouse to grow your firm, and then we will take that conversation. It will start on Clubhouse without a conversation, and then once the show is over, we will move that conversation to Clubhouse. And Melissa, you'll be joining us as well next Monday at 2:30.
I will be there. I'm pumped.
Fantastic. 2:30 Eastern time. I know you crazy people in your other time zones. That makes no sense. And then with daylight savings, and then like Arizona doesn't do daylight savings, so then that's like a whole nother thing.
I know. Yeah.
It's got to be awesome for people who it's got to be awesome if you are only in Arizona, but then it's terrible otherwise because you have to figure out you're on the same timeline with like a totally different group of people.
Yes, definitely.
All right, but I digress. So we're talking about unlocking your most important asset, You have determined that that is our brain, which is probably, which I don't think I disagree with, because your brain has so much more ability than everything else. But tell me more, like, tell me what we're talking about here. What did I leave out in your bio? Like, what more do we need to chat about before we get into the nitty gritty?
Well, okay. I'll give you a little background. So the things that I focus on inside of velocity work is like quarterly planning. It's really all about get clear on exactly what you're aiming for, make a plan, and honor your plan, period. That's kind of what it boils down to. And so I have all kinds of concepts I've talked about with that. This 100% has to do with that, but I've never really talked about it on my podcast. I've never talked about it anywhere publicly, but think about it a lot. And I do talk about it with my friends. I have a couple of friends who are, I mean, I'm being funny when I say this, but it's not a joke, who are like high rollers. And it's pretty great to see what is possible. Like they're an example of what's possible for me. Not that I want to create exactly what they've created, just how they live their life and how they think is pretty remarkable. And I get to soak that up sometimes. A few years ago, we had this conversation around assets and how to think about assets. And the goal in life should not be to make more money, although sure that can go along with it. The goal, if you're talking about wealth, is how to create and build and acquire more assets. And if you do that, the money will come. And you know, as we started to have this conversation, we were talking about different assets and not revenue producing assets, even though that's for sure something to be talked about. But that's not what I wanted to chat with you about today. It was more about, okay, for us as a human, what are our assets that we deal with, that we have a choice in investing in? And the three in that conversation, and this was a few years ago, and it totally changed how I think about things. And it's sort of the undercurrent of how I think about things now and have been thinking about things is in order is brain, your time, and then your money. And if you stack those, if you actually invest like in that order from the bottom up, if you invest your money into your time or to creating more time and into your brain, it'll give you a much higher return on your investment than if you were to spend your money in creating just more money. And then also your time, which is like the next layer up, the next most important, so to speak. If you invest your time in your brain, then it'll create more time and more money because you've been giving it that just because of and we could talk about why. Your brain it's this thesis that your brain is the most valuable asset you have. If someone who's built a company, if you took it all away for some reason, they could build it back probably pretty quickly because because of their knowledge, because of their brain, or somebody else couldn't do that. Overly simplified example is I'm happy to talk more about this and what it kind of looks like to stack those assets. But it's important. It changed the game for me. And when I look around me at those who are acquiring wealth the fastest, they treat things this way. They buy themselves more time, and they put money into their brain, and they put time into thinking and using their brain. And then what comes out of that just rolls out. You create more time for yourself, and you create more money as well. So we could go deeper, but I'll stop talking for a moment.
No, so this is my first question. So what is your definition of an asset when you're talking about, your brain being the biggest asset? Like what is
an asset to me is a resource with value. And how I think about it is a resource with value that returns or that gives you a positive return on your investment.
Okay. And so, cause like, it's interesting. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Either my kid was like 3 months old or it was like right before he was born, because I read this as a parenting book, even though it's not intended to be. And like, how do you instill the same traits and wisdom to a child? Because like, ultimately what he says is so true. You've been making $50,000 a year, so you spend $49,000 a year, and then you get a promotion to 60, and then you raise your expenses. And like, so you're you're never building assets to build more wealth. You're just living to your means.
Yes.
And so it's interesting that you talk about flipping that into looking at your brain as your most important asset. It's one of those things that like, it makes so much sense what you said because I've done it for so long, just not in like an organized method.
But that's the thing. I think truly wealthy people do. And I don't know what your balance sheet is, but I do know that you have a really high, rich quality of life. And there's a reason for that. And I do think that you naturally are pretty good at this anyway. But I think it's an interesting conversation to have because I don't think most people are. I wasn't until it's something clicked when I was I was a part of the conversation, but I was just listening to how they think about things. And it was like, wow. And so when I started asking questions, it was like, no. I funnel most of my money and my time back into my brain, and it just generates more time and more money for me. And if you don't do that, and also here's something else to think about. I think people do this, but they don't consciously do this. So when you decide to go to a university or a college, we think of we're investing in education. You are investing in your brain. You're going to make your brain a more valuable asset because you're acquiring that knowledge and potentially developing some skills along the way. I think there's other investments that come out of college, your network, there's all kinds of things. But that's one. When you think about the education, it's saying the same thing, but the people who say that I'm investing in education, oftentimes they think they're investing something outside of themselves. And if you start thinking about in your brain, literally thinking about your brain as an asset, you just start piling, not just information, because there is such a thing as being just a consumer. But I think there's 5 ways for me, how I think about it. There's 5 ways to make your brain a more valuable asset. And knowledge is one of them. So,
all right. Yeah. So what knowledge,
skill development. So practicing skills, mind management is a big one, which is kind of a skill, but it's specific to me and how I think about it. Problem solving. And the other one I always think about a lot is like ingenuity or thinking on purpose and creating new ideas that you didn't have in your sphere before. So those are the 5 things I think about. And so I do invest my money and time in creating those things and developing my brain in more and more of those ways.
Michael Urbina says you're the best. So
I love him. Hi, Michael.
So it's interesting because I think like I think the bottom 2 are easier. And I wasn't really thinking about the top one until, I guess like what you talked about with education, going to college is the easiest one. So can you...
The bottom 2 are easier. Problem solving and ingenuity?
No, sorry. I meant from the time and money, like brain,
okay, so,
time, money.
Yes.
So basically, the bottom 2 are really the whole like employer-employee relationship. You're trading time for money. You're buying people's time. You're hiring people to do things for you faster than you can do them, cheaper than you can do them, or at a rate where it's not worth your time. Mm-hmm. Am I right in that concept?
You are. So, and that's a really good point. I think that's a really beautiful way to spend your money is you can make time more valuable. You can't get more minutes, but you can make each minute more valuable by, as an example, investing in people who work for you to create more value in the same number of minutes. And then whatever time that frees up for you, you invest that time into learning, skill development, growing, thinking, new ideas for your business, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah.
So 99% of the time when we are talking about this, we're talking about an employer or a business owner because they're really the only ones that have the control to exchange time for money from a business standpoint, or is this something that's still applicable to the non-business component of people's lives?
Okay, that's a good question. I only work with owners. I am an owner. And so I guess, and the people I was mentioning, they are owners. And so naturally I'm used to having this conversation around owners, but like if I have a kid, I'm going to raise my kid to think this way. So I don't know. I think there's opportunity for everybody to have that way of thinking, okay, here's another way to think about it. I say a lot that I don't think people are taught how to think enough. And so even as lawyers, I don't know why. This just is my observation. I think lawyers fall prey oftentimes to people who sell them a blueprint or just here. You don't have to think, you just do these things. And there's times where maybe that's a valuable thing, but you aren't developing your brain. You know who's getting better at building a business? The person who's selling you that blueprint. You know who's not getting better at building a business? The person who bought the blueprint. And I'm not saying that you can't buy blueprints, but you have to discern when you're actually robbing yourself of an opportunity that's going to make your brain more valuable for what you're trying to build versus taking a shortcut. So I think that kind of thinking of just discerning where you're putting your money and your time and always making your brain first will give you the highest return the fastest if you take the risk, so to speak, because people don't think of it like this oftentimes. It's not risky, but to take the risk to actually invest more in your brain so that you can produce results. And people who I don't even have somebody in my head who does this. So I really don't mean this as an insult to a specific kind of person. But even in my industry, in the coaching industry, every industry has the easy access to blueprints or just buy my thing and then you'll be successful. The reason that that's a trap is what we're talking about right now. Because if somebody takes your business away for some reason or something catastrophic happens, you can't rebuild it. You don't know how. You just bought a blueprint. And, there may be a time and a place to do that for a specific element of the business, but I run for the hills when I see that word. I just don't like it.
Yeah, because I think I want to say it was on one of Larry Weinstein's podcasts where he talked about like there's the done for you, the done with you, and the done by you. Yeah. And so and I always talk about from even if somebody's hiring us for an insane marketing budget, like the first 3 months, the first 6 months, the first year, it's going to be done with you because we need to know, what are the best cases that you have? What's the best demographic? What are the cases that you've already been sent? Did you like the most? How can we target those? Are those coming in from similar set of ads? And then eventually it becomes less and less of a two-way street. But it would be a lot easier not to do that, but I don't think it's as successful than when you're building that relationship.
Okay, that's a really good example of like discerning, because I think that in that instance, if you're on the journey, you just want to understand. That's kind of what it is. That's all it takes. It doesn't mean that you're the one that has to execute all the work, but your brain needs to understand how and why these decisions are being made and why you're doing what you're doing so that, you're not stuck if that company goes away or if your company goes away. You know how to recreate that or hire the right people that know what they're talking about. And you know that because of what you understand. So yeah, that's a perfect example. Like it doesn't mean a law firm owner should be executing the things that you execute for law firm owners. It just means that you don't want to be blind to it. And you need to develop the ability to understand and be a part of the journey so that you can make even better decisions moving forward. That's I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, and it's interesting because ultimately moving your business to the point where all of the employees have their own kingdoms of things that they are in charge of, that they run, that they are responsible for making better and working with. The ability to get to that system is probably the most important knowledge of a business owner. And so it's not necessarily that at the end of the day, everything about the business. It's that how to put people in the right seats and give them the right experience, understanding, control, empowerment, whatever you want to call it.
I mean, that's a skill, I think. I mean, the first time people do it, there's some bumps in the road and you figure out how you could have set things up differently or set expectations differently or made a different call to get a different outcome. And that's development. I use that word a lot when I'm working with clients. I want clients to develop themselves, to operate in a way that serves them for the long haul. And that's kind of, you're hitting on that. I will say though, the main reason that I thought this would be cool to talk about, actually not just with my friends, but with you, because you are my friend. But the reason I thought this would be fun to talk about and bat things around is that most of the people that I come across don't spend time thinking. They don't spend, they're busy. They're super busy. But that doesn't mean that they're actually creating results. They're just busy. And this is a piece of the puzzle, I think, is when you give yourself either invest in education or, knowledge that will help you develop skills, but investing, whether it's money, but most importantly, investing your time into your brain. Like give your brain time about lessons learned or what you like, kind of look ahead for your firm and see where things are going. If nothing changes right now, play that out all the way to the end, right? If like really just think high level for yourself and your business, the payoffs are huge. If you don't, you end up kind of on a hamster wheel. People don't value it enough to use their time for their brain, to invest their time for their brain, because they feel like these other things are more urgent / important, but it's not a conscious choice. It's just by default what's happening. And if we're just talking about these three assets, money, time, and brain, the more you can use money and time to create a more valuable brain, the better off you'll be, no matter who you are. So,
and I think that's I mean, let me give everybody the sales experience for hiring you or somebody like you, because I think maybe it comes off better coming from me instead of from you. But like ultimately, there's not much that somebody can teach you that you can't find out there in some manner. But from the standpoint of what we're talking about here, like hiring a specific coach, you're putting skin in the game with the money, you're carving out the time, you're having somebody hold you accountable, and you're having somebody who's created like a specific system. So you're not just like, oh, shiny object, new this, new, because like ultimately you can get complete paralysis by analysis on all these things because there's so much out there. And really you have more limited time than you have limited brain power, than you have limited money. Right?
Wait, you have to say the last sentence again. You have what?
And for the most point, you have time is your biggest limit, really. I mean, like, I guess yes. You eventually stop thinking when you stop existing, but like you can think about an unlimited amount of things in that time. That's just
because you ran out of time.
Right. Exactly. And so like, and from a money standpoint, I always think it's not funny. It's always, I'm trying to think of the right word. It's always interesting in a probably negative way when you have the attorneys that are billing $250 or more an hour that are still answering their phones or still doing, all these lower level tasks because they're depriving themselves of the time to do higher level tasks or just the time to think, like you said. And so it's interesting because I think a lot of the benefit of a coach or a consultant is to get you into the mindset of carving out your time, of following a consistent plan, of knowing when to consider what's going on, change what's going on, actually do it, and balancing a lot of those things. So to me, that sounds like some of the best investments for your brain that you can make. I don't know if you have other good brain investments people should be looking for.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things. Okay, so I don't want to forget to talk about planning because that's full brain power. So we'll talk about that in a second. But the other thing is that I was going to say that sometimes I think this helps people reframe. It's not the perfect analogy, but it does some work here. If you woke up and every 24 hours you had $24,000 to invest, then you would think about, and that was like your time. If you think about that as your time, instead of 24 hours, it's $24,000. You would treat that asset much differently. If you wake up and you have $24,000 and you don't know exactly how you're going to invest it and you're kind of bumbling around and, like it's not like you get to keep it. You either invest it or you light it on fire. That is your time because it's so limited and so scarce. That's just what it is. So you can either burn your time or you can invest your time. And so sometimes attaching money to it, because we somehow, as a culture, as a society, that's where it's easier to see the value with money than with time. And we all know intellectually that time is this scarce resource and something that should be taken very seriously, but people don't. So so that's one thing. Maybe it'll help that land in terms of whoever's listening to this, evaluating, do you like how you're investing that $24,000? Or are you some of it getting lit on fire? That's one way to think about it. The other thing though, that with the brain, when you invest, so planning is, people don't take planning seriously enough. And the point isn't to have this perfect plan that's going to go perfectly. The point is to have a very well thought out, deliberate plan that is, you can see the result you're pushing to create, and then you honor that plan. Both of those things require heavy use, and both of those things most law firm owners aren't doing, and maybe lawyers too. I've had so many requests, or people have these ideas when they come to retreats that I'm leading, or planning retreats that I'm leading, or whatever. They'll say, you should get this into law schools, because even if they don't have their own firm, they should think about their time this way. I'm like, okay, that's maybe next year's thing, but this year I'm not doing that. So if you're listening to this and you're not a law firm owner, but you're an attorney or anything else, you can still apply these things. Planning, when you are shooting for something very specific, you have to know what result you want to create, and then you make a plan to get there. That requires a lot of brain power. And if it's new to you, it feels extra hard, but it's worth it. It's worth it to do that more than just keep staying on your hamster wheel of the busyness of the firm. Making a plan and taking that role really seriously is extremely important. And that takes time. You have to give your brain the space. You have to invest time into your brain to create that level of a plan. And when you do that, the skill development that you're using there, your brain becomes more valuable. That asset becomes more valuable. And then on top of that, I mentioned one of the 5 things that I think 5 ways that you can make your brain a more valuable asset. One of them.
Can I jump in before you go to the next one?
Oh, yeah.
So, but there's the second part to that you talked about, which is honoring the plan. And that's what you called it, right? Verbatim, honoring the plan.
That's where I'm going next. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, then we're going to the same place. Then go for it, and then I'll jump in.
Okay. So that's So one of the 5 things that makes your brain more valuable is mind management. Honoring your plan is about managing your brain. If people think of time management is actually easy. Time management is just saying, this is what I'm going to do with my time. Well, actually doing that is a very different story than what you said you were going to do. So the management comes in, and that's a skill that absolutely can be developed and honed, is honoring your plan, because there's all these things that compete for our attention in the middle of our plan, whether it's a quarterly plan or whether it's a day that you're planned out your day. All these things will pull at you and tug at you for your attention. And some of them are external triggers, like clients to call or employees that have a question, or I don't know, like all these things. But then there's also internal triggers, which I refer to as urges. I refer to this a lot, but there's a book called Indistractable that is an amazing book. Someday I'm going to have that author on my podcast. His name is Nir Eyal. He calls he also says the internal urges are the real problem. It's not the external urges, because you can kind of shut things down or make guardrails or set expectations. The internal urges that pull you away from the thing you said you were going to do because you don't feel like doing it in the moment is the problem. And people will chalk this up to be like, I'm just not good. I hear all the time, do I say this out loud? Because I don't have any insult by it, and I don't want someone to take it the wrong way. But I hear all the time, I have trouble keeping focus, or, I have ADD, and they kind of say it flippantly. Some people probably really do have that, and that's a thing to deal with. But it still doesn't mean you have to be a victim of all of this, right? It maybe mean there's harder hurdles for people who are truly, that's a thing. But most people, it's not. Most people just they answer the urge that happens in the moment, instead of not answering the urge and doing what they said they were going to do anyway. They just flee, shiny object, or they don't feel like doing what they're doing. So then other things win out, and then their plan got derailed. That is a brain skill. That is not something that the world is giving you trouble on. So when people talk about time management, they're really talking about brain management. And if you just wake up to that, then you realize, okay, it's worth my time to plan. that is going to give me a huge return on my investment because I will have something very specific and well thought out to honor. And then on top of that, it is worth my money and time to gain the skills and knowledge that will help me manage my brain better so I can honor my plan better. If people treated that way, it would change the game. I mean, that's what I do. So I see it all the time with clients, but it changes the game. Yeah.
And from my perspective, I love that you use the phrase honoring the plan, because to me, like, it's not just following through on the plan that you need. You need to be following through on what you think the plan is, checking at certain intervals, making tweaks as you see it, and then re-following through on the new plan. That, I think, honoring it, I think that just phrases it out so much better, because in essence, if you take if you have enough time, everything can be solved with this problem. Create a plan, try out the plan, edit the plan, keep trying. You will eventually find a solution to every single problem. It's just a question of where can you pay money to get that solution faster? Where can you learn more to get to that solution faster? Where can you implement to get to that solution faster? That's really all that we're kind of fighting about, I think.
I think we're saying the same thing, but it's a question of how are you going to get your brain developed so that it's a more valuable asset that will always be it habitually make great plans and honor those plans, period. A lot of people like to call that phase execution, and it is execution, but execution is somewhat external, and people can make excuses real easily why it couldn't be executed on. And I just think honoring the plan, it puts it back on exactly where the responsibility is, which is you. I drew this. This is very, very crude.
Ooh, here we go.
Well, okay. I was like, because I've never presented this before, I was like, how am I going to explain the tiers and all that? So I drew this like kindergarten drawing, but like money, time, brain, and the blue is what you invest your money and time, and you invest your money in your brain. You invest your time into your brain. And because of that, your brain becomes a rainmaker. You create more time and you create more money because you're giving your brain the space to think. So anyway, there we go.
And the funny thing to me is so basically all of business is some things are worth your time, some things are worth your money, some things are worth both, and some things are worth neither. But for the most part, as a business owner, you have nothing but time at the beginning, and then towards the end, you have nothing but money because your time is so much more valuable. You're limited on so many things. But what you have it put out is in such a better control manner. Like if you're investing in your brain to then make those decisions to prioritize your time or your money, that's the long-term success, as opposed to I'm thinking about it on a decision by decision basis. Your thing is invest in the brain, and then you don't have to worry about it because your brain just gets better and better at making the right decisions.
Yeah. And I do know that it's not a cakewalk of a road, because if you want to invest your money to give you more value with time, then you've got to hire people. This is not a cakewalk, right? You have a hiring to do, and you do that well so that you actually get the time to invest in your brain, because otherwise you may get time sucked out of you if you have the wrong people in there. So I do know that it's not like a snap your fingers, but what I do think is snap your fingers is your mental model for thinking about this. It changes your decision-making around how you decide to invest the money that you have, and how you decide to invest the time that you have, and how do you want to create more value in each asset. If you want to create a more valuable brain, you have to invest in it. If you want to create more time, you have to invest in it. If you want to create more money, then the cool thing is that the ideas that come out and the thinking that comes out really generates more time, and then that generates even more money. So yeah, it's a cool, beautiful cycle. And it's not that I don't struggle with this ever, but I love having it. It has informed a lot of my decisions, and I haven't taught this concept to clients. I haven't talked about this outside of friends, but man, it changes everything. I used to think time was my most valuable asset. But what you do with that time, how you invest that time, is almost an afterthought. Well, of course, then I'm going to go out and get the work on referral relationships. Like that is a good use of time, but don't forget about the most valuable asset, which has created all of this and will continue to create more, which is your brain. Yeah.
See, interesting, because to me, I look at time as a resource, not an asset.
I do think my definition of an asset is a resource with value.
A resource, okay. Because I still think time's the most valuable resource, just from the standpoint of you can make your brain do better work in the same time.
Wait, let me think about this. Hang on. You think of time as the most valuable resource because you can make your brain better.
Like if you give your brain 5 minutes a day to think, like to truly think for 5 minutes, the better that your brain is, the more powerful your brain is, the more discerning your brain is, the more you can get done in that time frame. So you're still maximizing that resource investment by having the better brain asset, if you will.
So you're saying five minutes a day to create a more valuable brain.
Well, no. What I'm saying is, like, let's say you can carve out 5 minutes a day for your brain, whether that's meditation, whether that's planning, whether that's whatever, like you have that time block. The better that your brain is for those 5 minutes, the more and the better you can accomplish, whether that's more thoughts, whether that's better thoughts, whether that's more planning, whether that's better ideas, whatever it is. But you're still operating off of the same resource of a certain amount of time, because all of us have a finite resource of time. We just don't know how finite it is, in essence. We're getting like real philosophical now.
Well, we are, and I love it. It is the most scarce of the three. And so I could see where some people think it's the most valuable, but I don't think it's the most important, right? Because if you don't invest in your brain, you're kind of stuck in a loop down here.
Right.
And so I think I'm saying I agree with you.
Yeah. Well, no, it's just like, it's interesting. I talk to lawyers all the time. So I talk to a bunch of people that are miserable, and I talk to a select few that are very happy, or, they're at a 6 or a 7 trying to get to a 9 or a 10. And so but if you think of it from the standpoint of you're going to sleep, like, let's say about a third of your life, you're going to work about a third of your working life, or if not, you're going to school or whatever. And then you've got like another third left over. So on your average day, it's 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours of work, and 8 hours for everything else. And so it's interesting because like the more people find work that they enjoy, the more you find hobbies and other life interests that you enjoy, the more you enjoy spending all of that time, and the easier it is to spend that time at work, or the easier you sleep at night, or whatever it is, as opposed to just sacrificing and realizing you're going to be miserable for a third or more of your day every single day for the next 20 or 30 years.
Yeah. And I do want to make sure I'm clear that I don't mean this, that you should just spend all your time developing your brain. Like, it's not about packing every minute, but that's really thinking about, we all have the same amount of time. How do you want to invest that? And do you like the ways that you're investing it? And I think there has to be leisure time and rest and rejuvenation time, or else it's all like, what are we doing? Right. Which is I think you are a model for that for attorneys. There's a few out there, but you are one for sure, that you value your time in a way, like you do think about how you spend your time. You're very conscious. You don't get caught up in the hamster wheel. And maybe you have at some point, but you aren't now.
A very long time.
Right?
Well, and the funny thing to me is, like, my wife and I probably watch an hour or two of TV every night. And I get that, like, that's the, mind rot. But, like, literally that's what shuts my brain off at night for me to be able to go to sleep. Like, there is just this moment of whatever random crap on Netflix or a comedic special or something like that like really helps shut our brains off and go to bed. Yeah. Which is interesting because, like, I am totally on, like, for the people that like, I can't watch TV, it rots my brain. I totally get it. But like, that's how I sleep. And I don't know. Sometimes it comes off as a weird thing, but.
Well, that's a good point too. I think there needs to be, I have zero judgment about the decisions someone makes with their time. I more care about the question. Are you spending your time in the ways that you choose to? And are you investing your time in the ways that you would really consciously choose to? That's all that matters. To each their own, right? Those two people I was telling you about that, they have big businesses. One of them, this is asinine. I can't even wrap my head around it. One of them has a $37 million business. That is crazy to me. And she wasn't always that, but it was $300,000 4 or 5 years ago. So it's nuts. But watching her and then watching our other good friend who has like a $2 million business, they spend their time, they invest their time consciously in very different ways. But they're both thinking in that same principle, like first principles thinking about, I have money, what am I going to invest it in? And I'm always going to go up the chain, time and money, or time and brain. I have time, how am I going to invest that time? I'm always going to go up the chain to my brain. And there's times where you don't choose to work, right? Like you have plenty of leisure time to rejuvenate, and that looks different for everybody, I think. And if TV is it, TV is it. I love that you said that, because I feel like that's that's important to give people permission to, you get to design this, but just,
I mean, you're not going to go to the gym and do bicep curls nonstop for a week and be at The Rock. Like you're just going to break your whole body down. And it's the same thing with your brain.
Yes.
So the downside is the sooner you start on this journey, the longer it's going to take you to develop your brain the right way. But the upside is the sooner you start on this journey, the more it is like you have to take time off. What else, makes its way through and what other ideas you come out of it. And like, I don't have that many unique ideas. For the most part, I listen to a bunch of podcasts or videos and stuff, and I discern what makes the most sense to me. But to the extent that I have had any unique ideas, a lot of the best ones have taken place with like me and my 3-year-old on the Elmo train at SeaWorld on like a random Wednesday, just because like my mind was allowed to wander, and it made those like weird connections between other things that you do.
Right. 100%. That's right. I think I did a podcast episode like over a year ago called Super Thinking Part 1 and Part 2. Super Thinking is a concept I learned from one of those friends that I was telling you about, that it's when I started applying what we're talking about today. Back then, that's when the concept of super thinking, because it was like, okay, if I'm going to give my brain space, I need to think about what I've read and consumed. I need to think about what I'm thinking about. And sometimes the best ideas happen, like you said, not in a space where you're trying to do that. But it's a really cool exercise. It's a very fruitful exercise, especially if you stick with it. Idea generation is a muscle. It is a skill. It's not you either have it or you don't. That's not how this works. So if you sit down and, one rule I try to, that I adopted from someone I've heard is that for every, hour that I read, I need to spend an equal amount of time thinking about what I've read and how am I going to actually what am I doing with it? Is it just, am I just consuming, and then I'm going to, for sure, I'm going to forget like within a week, I'm going to forget that principle where I'm like, oh, that's cool. That's going to go to the wayside. So having sort of equal time to think about what you've consumed produces really good ideas. It helps me with idea generation for my business, for example. Another example of how to use your brain, spend time with your brain, is James Altucher has a podcast that I love. And he has something he's been doing for years, 10 ideas a day. And so he'll have a topic, how to make my wife smile. It could be something as simple as that, 10 ideas. And then, or how to make an extra 100K in my business this year, 10 ideas. Or I want to know that person. I look up to that person. I want them to be in my network and for me to be in theirs. And so he provides value to them before he'll ever try to like get up in their business. And if he'll email them and say, hey, I know you're doing this initiative. I just sat down and was really thinking about it. Here's 10 ideas. I hope one of them is useful with what you're trying to do. And then of course they, not all of them, but a large percentage of them will write back and be like, thank you so much. And like either, maybe that kicks off a relationship or not, but it's value generation that he's doing with his brain, which is what we're talking about. I think people don't know how to use time to develop their brain, but consuming is one of it. But if you only consume and you don't actually think, like you don't develop the skill of thinking about what you've consumed and how you want to actually put that out into the world, or what that might look like in your business, then, 90% of what you listen to is going to be forgotten. So, I don't know.
Well, but I also think that that's a good spot to bring in outside expertise sometimes too. Like, hey, I know I want to triple my business. I want to hit these numbers, but I don't know the smaller steps to get there. So like, this is what I'm thinking, Melissa, what can you add, or what makes the most sense, or, something along those lines, where you're using the experts to help you craft the right roadmap for you. But I mean, like, I'm totally with you. I talk to so many firm owners. I'm like, look, you have the right answers. I just have the right questions to ask you.
Yes.
Like, you should know who you want to work with. You should know what cases make you the most money. If you don't, we can talk about, like, go back through your last 15 cases and let's see what they have in common. But otherwise, like, at the end of the day, I just want to take what you already know that you want and give you the roadmap to get it.
Yes. I made a list, if it's helpful for anyone, how I think about, like, when I think about investing in my brain, these are some of the really common ones. So coaching myself, or mind management, which really just entails me getting things out of my head and onto paper and having a look at them and deciding, like, is that the way I want to think about this? Sometimes I don't need to put it on paper, but that's helpful. Just making sure my perspective is clean so that I don't derail myself because I have a crappy perspective or an opinion, like, or victim mindset about what's happening. Things are happening to me. And there's it's true though, a cheesy quote out there that this is not happening to me, it's happening for me. I mean, it is you either have a victim mindset or you don't. That's kind of the thing there. And so keeping my head clean so that I'm moving forward on a path that makes sense and is productive and is useful and doesn't spin me off into something else. So coaching myself, hiring a coach for oftentimes specified knowledge kind of stuff, something specific I want to work on, hire a coach. Books, podcasts, for sure. That's consumption. Taking courses, if it's specified, as like something I want to dig into, studying, and then I put down super thinking because that's what I call it. But like sessions where I just sit and I consider what I've consumed, and I consider how that might be useful in my business or for my clients, or, and that's where I kind of believe that there's no new ideas, but I kind of don't, because we all have different experience and background and knowledge and skills. And so with whatever you consume, blended with your specific skill set and your experience, you'll have an idea. Like if you and I heard the exact same thing and we both thought, oh, that's cool, and we sat down to think about how that might be useful in the world somehow, I would come up with a different idea than you did, because you have a different set of background skills and experience than I do. So it's sort of like ideas that you might hear get interpreted in a really unique, specific way to you. I'm talking to everybody who might be listening to this. You have you can spin out an idea from something you've heard that no one else can. So don't cut that short. Give your brain the space to actually consider all of that, because you will generate ideas that are game changers for your clients, that are game changers for your team. It's like, and without it, you're just a person who consumes and forgets 90% of it.
Well, it's funny that you phrase it that way, because like I always look at it in terms of looking back at what's already worked. Like if you were sitting there talking to Mark Zuckerberg and you'd be like, oh, well, there's this thing called MySpace, so what do you need Facebook for? But now, like, you can sit here in 2021 where like MySpace is a footnote on things that didn't survive long enough, and Facebook is still going billion strong.
Right.
So there's ways to take what in theory should be the same idea and make it better and make it last longer and make it more survivable, even if that idea has already been had, sort of, in theory.
I was thinking too about what you said about, because you do this with your clients in your own way, and how I think about helping people. I know that I have to market in a, like quarterly planning, and that's all true. That's exactly what happens. But I know the whole reason my business exists is to teach law firm owners how to do this. If I'm the one leading all of this stuff and I don't teach people how to do this for themselves, what are we doing here? I'm sort of making a a business that people rely on me. And I'm not interested in that. I want to make a business where people can come and get guidance. And like you said, with their milestones and their planning, but I don't make that plan for you. I ask you the right questions to make your own damn plan. And then when you do that, then it's like, okay, now, even though maybe you have some development to keep doing and it's going to take practice, you're not left in the lurch. If for some reason you would want to attempt that on your own, you can totally take the skill set and carry it forward. It is easier to have facilitation, but you don't have to, right? So
see, I think for lawyers, it's accountability they need more so even than facilitation. It's just like, I have paid you money. I am accountable to this. It is scheduled on the calendar. This is our retreat. We will do it.
okay,
Like,
that's a huge
there.
piece of it. But that's if there's going to be a day I get you in a room for 2 days and we do strategy on your business, and you will see how valuable facilitation is. It
Yes.
changes the game.
Sorry, I'm not undervaluing facilitation. I am maybe overvaluing accountability.
Maybe you're overvalued. Okay, that's
But
fair.
like, it's just it's amazing to me. Like I'll have a check-in meeting set with a client 3 weeks out, and it's like amazing to me. They will get a series of reminders, and then like an hour before, I get this like 15-paragraph email brain dump of everything that they've done for this meeting, even though like all of it was done in those 2 hours. So it's like, I see such an importance of the accountability of having the time already carved out for so much of this. Not to undermine the need for facilitation. It's interesting to me.
Actually, okay, so yes, you're totally right. That's a big piece of it, no question. But actually, even you're almost held accountable, at least the way I'm thinking about my clients. You're almost held accountable to showing up to making your plan. It's not even held accountable to do the things you said you were going to do. You're accountable to, like, you got to show up. I'm leading a workshop. You signed up for it. You got to show up, and then that's investing time in your brain. So maybe there's accountability for you investing time in your brain. And I don't think people think of it like that. And that's not a sexy way to look at this. So I don't market my business that way, but that's what's happening behind the scenes, if that makes sense. Yes, they walk away with the plan. Yes, they walk away with accountability for execution, but it's way deeper than that, because there's accountability for you showing up. And when you show up, you develop skills you could take with you forever. Yeah.
I mean, for 99% of what you buy, you're not buying it solely because someone's selling it. You have known that you have needed this or wanted this for so long, and now finally is the time that you are going forward with that. Whether that's coaching, whether it's a new pair of shoes, whether it's a gym membership, whether it's a dinner, whatever it is. Like, you didn't wake up this morning and be like, oh, that's right, food exists. It's a thing. But it may be like, all right, I'm going to do a date night. So we're going to go to a fancier place. We've been meaning to go here, whatever. And I think it's the same for the vast majority of purchases are more because you need a new car. You're just waiting for the right special to purchase one. You need coaching, or you need to know more things, or you need a better company. You're just finally, now is the right time for whatever reason you've created.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think walking in to make those investments with this stacked model is valuable, is helpful. It's subtle sometimes, but I think you either are a person who operates thinking this way or you aren't. And not that you can't be successful without thinking in this way, but I think it's just a lot slower.
Makes perfect sense. All right, so we are getting to the end. So our next show is supposed to be on Thursday. Well, we are trying to find a guest. There was a rescheduling that we needed to make based upon some emergencies that came in place. So I don't know exactly what our show will be on for Thursday yet, but I hope for those of you that have been here, you know what to expect, which would be me, but then really a great guest who has a ton of insight and wisdom to share. So that'll be Thursday at 1:30. We will get the information as soon as we have somebody confirmed for the slot, or our originally scheduled guest will be able to move their other emergency, but I don't know. We'll figure that out. So with that, Melissa, before I let you go, the last piece of advice, the last nugget here, if somebody's been listening to this for the last hour and they take nothing away from this except your one thing here, what is your biggest takeaway? What is the thing that makes somebody the exhibit A of a successful attorney?
I was taking a lot of notes as I prepped for this. I was just writing down thoughts. Oh man. one final nugget, I guess just invest in learning how to aim, how to make a good plan, and how to honor your plan. And if you're weak in all three, that's okay. If you're weak in one, focus on that one, but that's a bit of a tripod. And so if you are not good at one of those three, you're going to be stuck or spin in some way. So invest in developing yourself to be good at all three. And sure, that could be me, but that could also be books and podcasts and whatever. So just make the decision to invest your money and your time in getting better at those three things and developing your brain.
That was
having clarity on exactly what you're aiming for, making a well thought out, deliberate plan, and then honoring your plan. I think number 3 is the hardest, but depends on the human. David Goggins would probably disagree, if you know who that is.
Yes, can't hurt me.
I love that book.
I don't know. It's an interesting. Yeah, so because the beauty of this is there are certainly some things that are going to be different in between people, but you can get to a level of skill for these things to really figure out where you need help.
Yeah. You can get to a level of skill. I mean, think about the difference between, I'm using law firm's owner in this example, a law firm owner who is very clear about what they're aiming for. They have an excellent plan that's been thought out and they're going to honor their plan. Is it going to be the perfect plan? No, that's not the point. They have a really good plan that's been thought out. They're honoring it. Or someone who has no idea what they're aiming for. They have no plan. It's just a hustle and a grind. Who are you going to put your money on? So choose consciously to invest your time and money into developing yourself, your brain, making it a more valuable asset, a more valuable resource so that you can fly faster and more streamlined and not be held back by our own defaults.
There we go. Wonderful.
All right.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Always fun to talk with you.
I agree. I agree. It's always fun to talk to you. So we've got all the links over here. We've got all that information. Anything else you have coming up that people can keep an eye out for?
We have, April Sprint. The doors are still open. There's a few seats left. If you want to learn more about what the heck that is, just go to velocitywork.com. You can learn more about the sprint, coaching groups, and free resources are there.
All right, velocitywork.com, Breezy, if you can drop that in the comments and they can check out the April Sprint. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Exhibit A Attorneys. If you're interested in becoming the Exhibit A of Successful Attorney, please check us out at legalesemarketing.com, EASE.